Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It is episode 2584 of The Tom Woods Show, and I am absolutely thrilled to be talking to our old friend Bill Anderson, who is Professor Emeritus of Economics at Frostburg State University, and he is also Senior Editor at the Mises Institute, and he's coming to us he has switched coasts. Frostburg had him on one, and now he's out there on the other, but wherever he is, he's always doing good work, and I particularly want to talk to Bill today about a topic he wrote about so well and skillfully 18 years ago, 2006, relating to the Duke Lacrosse case, because it has now come back into the news. So, Bill, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you, Tom.
All right, so let's cast our minds back, because I bet I have some of my younger listeners who don't remember this at all, whereas you and I not only lived through it, but in your case, you wrote quite a bit about it. You smelled a rat from the very beginning, and now we have the alleged victim openly acknowledging here at the end of 2024 that she made the whole story up. So set the stage for us. What exactly were these various players on the Duke Lacrosse team accused of?
All right. 3 lacrosse players were accused of beating and raping a stripper named Crystal Mangum. And this was over spring break in 2006, and they had a team party. And at Duke at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but it was common for a lot of groups to have strippers as entertainment. And so these guys called an escort service, and they sent over a couple of women and who were actually prostitutes. And they had sort of an incident. The women left early because they realized they weren't going to get any business. And so later on, one of them claimed that she was beaten and raped by 3 lacrosse players. And so a prosecutor, the local prosecutor who was had been appointed by the governor and who was going to be running for election, and we'll talk more about that later, but he was running for election. He saw this as a way to be able to galvanize the Black community. And so he pursued the case very aggressively. These 3 guys were indicted. And of course, and the media condemned them immediately, especially the New York Times, which also played a villainous role in this whole thing. And so in the end, this case went on. And as they found out there was no DNA that could link them, there was literally no evidence whatsoever that demonstrated a rape, or even that these guys had even touched her or been near her. And so as the case continued to fall apart, ultimately the state attorney general took the case. He investigated, and a little over a year afterwards, he publicly declared that the 3 guys were innocent. But of course, you can imagine in campus politics how this thing just blew up, and this turned into the story in the United States, and especially on college campuses for a long time.
Well, what made you gravitate to it? I mean, you wrote quite a few pieces on the subject.
Yeah, part of it was I was a collegiate athlete 50 years ago. And I ran for the track for the University of Tennessee, was on a couple of national championship teams. And so I'm a little more familiar with sports and how things can get out of hand. The other thing was, at the time, I was writing a lot on prosecutorial misconduct. And most of the stuff that I wrote on was about federal court and federal criminal law. But I was looking at prosecutorial misconduct, and man, this thing was like, this was the poster child for prosecutorial misconduct. And so that's the angle that I went at it with. And of course, the longer I stayed with it, the more I realized that it was a composite of everything that was going on in campus in terms of left-wing politics and, campus, the whole left-wing grievance industry and how it had invaded academia and especially the elite universities like Duke. And so it just, this thing metastasized. And so when I started, my first piece was even before there'd been indictments. And, I condemned the players for having strippers. I always thought that was pretty, raunchy. I didn't know at the time that was common at Duke. In fact, I was the first one to break the story that the basketball team under the sainted Mike Krzyzewski had also had a party with strippers. And, because the news media was saying, oh, Mike Krzyzewski would never do that. Well, I wrote, yeah, he would. And he did. And so, first thing I wrote was like, there is no there. There, that had a line of their evidence. We don't need no stinking evidence. And so I was galvanized by it because I was looking at some ESPN recordings. And they had a rally at North Carolina Central, which is, a HBCU. They're located in Durham. And the woman was a student at NCCU, and the student body latched onto it. And Mike Nifong appeared in a rally over there at the university. And he declared that this case is not going away. I'm pursuing it. And of course they were all, this, and that's where the student body vice president told Newsweek magazine that he didn't care if they did it or not, that these guys should be convicted because of what white folks have done to us. And so, and I realized, I remember getting this really sick feeling, Tom, and think, oh my God, this guy is going to go through with it. He's going to push this case and he's going to charge people who have not committed a crime, and that this thing is going to blow up. And I realized then that this was a fire out of control.
I think there are outrages like this more than we realize, because not every case becomes a national, an object of national attention. But this one did, and there was, as you say, to say the least, prosecutorial misconduct to the point where Nifong got himself in trouble later on because of how he conducted himself. But is it true that people in the administration, the Duke University administration, had or withheld exculpatory evidence? And if so, what form did that take?
No, they didn't withhold exculpatory evidence. What they did was they decided to sort of go with the flow. And, at this point they have, you've got this force. How do you deal with it? Well, the president decided he was going to condemn the players. In fact, at a Rotary Club or some sort of big meeting in Durham, he told the audience, he said, I don't know what they did. Whatever these players did was bad enough. And so, in other words, they threw them under the bus immediately. They canceled the season. People met with the president, and they said he was absolutely stone cold with them. His name was Richard Broadhead. Broadhead and he also had an administration. There was a dean there who had been at Penn and had been one of the guys lighting the fire in that infamous water buffalo case of 1993. He matriculates down to Duke, and now he's throwing gasoline on the fire. And I can't recall his name. I was looking it up this morning. I couldn't find it in Google search. But
I know the guy you mean. And he. So are you talking about the person? Because he kind of retired from political agitation after that. That was it. I thought he'll be like a big opinion molder or something, but he just retired and we never heard from him again, I guess, until this.
Yeah. And you have to understand also, once it came out, and it trickled out. And it easily could have just disappeared, but because the first police officer to investigate did not believe her. And he, by the way, even this, she actually did not set out to create this accusation. She was somebody, she had a criminal record, and she was drunk and drugged up, and they took over this place called Durham Medical Access. And if, likely she might have ended up going back to jail, and or at least having to spend some time in jail or in rehab or something. And the woman the intake person there asked her, says, "Have you been raped?" Now, you're not supposed to do that. The intake people are not supposed to ask that, but have you been raped? And then she said, yes. All right. Now, understand why she did that, because now she doesn't have to face any consequences. Of course, once somebody claims rape, then they have to take them off to get a rape test. And she went to Duke University Hospital, and they never actually fully did the rape test. She kept, all of a sudden, she would alternate between screaming and being in terrible pain and just being calm. And in fact, they said she was sleeping like a baby. This is late, about 3:00 in the morning. And, but I think she was just trying to get out of a bad situation that she put herself into. But then you have to understand the activists. Once the activists took over, and especially the white women activists who then joined force with black activists, and that's really when this bonfire started. There was a woman who was training to be a sexual assault nurse examiner, and she was employed at Duke. And so she and another doctor took this case and, there did the examination. They never went through the full examination, but this woman decided, she must have been raped. And her name was Tara Levesey, and more about her later. But she got involved with this, and on and on. And then the Raleigh News and Observer, a reporter named Samia Kahana, and she was a young leftist who was on the staff there. She finds her, interviewed her. They lied in there. They claimed that her father came to see her in the hospital and she was all beat up and all that. She was never admitted to the hospital, but the article said she's admitted to the hospital. She's been beaten, and they had a front page thing about how these guys were barking racial slurs at these women. And then in the end, it all turned into sexual violence. And then once the News and Observer jumped into this thing and publicized it, now the fire is lit and you can't put it out. The analogy I'll give was last summer, a friend and I went up to Northern California, up to Mount Lassen Peak, which is an old volcano. And we hiked to the top, and coming back, we ran into one of the famous wildfires here. Somebody had started a fire 2 hours earlier. It just started as a little thing. And by the time we got there, it was a conflagration, and it burned for a month and a half. And it just seemed like, and this is the same sort of thing, though, that you had this coming in, this person there, and all of a sudden, it's I referred to it as the bonfire of the inanities, and you end up having a bonfire. Now you can't put it out because too many people have an interest in keeping this thing going.
Hey, everybody, you don't need me to tell you just how maddening American healthcare and health insurance can be. When you look at it, it's a total mess, and you keep asking yourself, what am I even paying for? But you have to be asking yourself that question. And we all know it's not going to get better next year. It's not going to get better the year after that. And there's no magic bill that's going to solve it. Well, there is finally something you can do about it. Because this whole mess is why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for health care through crowdfunding. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more. And you don't have to worry about doctors' networks either. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use code WOODS. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, and remember code WOODS. There are a lot of things I want to bring up. I mean, for number one, the stuff you've been talking about just now, where people just join in to all this and take sides because they in general, they have access to grind against white people or against men or against white men or against a history of oppression or whatever. And then the details of the individual case get lost. Yeah. And these young men who didn't do anything now have to be put on trial in effect for just being white men, because as you know, as we're acknowledging here, there are people following the case because they just know the type. Like these kids should be punished. And as you were citing somebody saying you should be punished because of what your ancestors did. Absolutely bizarre. How can you have a legal system under these conditions when a particular case becomes more than that case? It becomes a symbol for various causes that people have. But if you're saying that there was no evidence in the sense of DNA evidence, there still was her very vivid testimony. And I guess they were going on the strength of that. Like an early form of believe all women.
Well, yeah, because what happened, and this gives you an idea of the absurdity of it. She kept telling different stories. There was one guy, 3 guys, 10 guys, and then they beat her for 30 minutes, and then they raped her, and then she went into all this detail about what they did. Okay, the stuff that she described, there would have been DNA all over the place, all over her body. There was, when she came into the hospital, there was no smell of bleach. The guys had not done that. And in fact, when the police, came investigated a couple days later and checked the bathroom had not been cleaned up since the party. Now, you would think that if guys did this thing, they would do everything they could to cover it up. But instead, you're right, there was no DNA in a situation where DNA would have been all over the place. That logically speaking, that from even if you took little bits and pieces of what you described, this is what you would find. They found none of it. And so, and this is really what's something that made my blood boil. So then Mike Nifong, the prosecutor, said, well, in the past before DNA, we used to, we didn't have to worry about this. And we'll just get her up there and she can testify to what happened. But the point is that DNA actually, in this case, and especially since she had not been cleaned up or anything like that DNA would have been there, absolutely, no doubt about it. Now, here is what the New York Times did. They trotted out Peter Neufeld, the founder of the Innocence Project, which uses DNA as proof of innocence, and they got Neufeld to say DNA doesn't matter. Yeah, go back and read that. He says, well, lots of people get convicted without DNA. That he said, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Peter Neufeld.
How long does this case go on before the men are declared to be not guilty?
About a year. I think it was April 7th, 2007 when they were declared. And I think the first indictment was mid to late April. You had first Reed Seligman and Colin Finnerty were indicted. Then David Evans was indicted right after he graduated from Duke.
And there are stories of these students being, I'm looking for the word, not taunted by their professors, but cases of professors being in one way or another abusive toward them on the presumption that they were guilty. And they would go to the Duke administration and they'd say, well, sorry, we can't help you.
Yeah, and there was great retaliation in one case, and Duke ended up having to pay a handsome settlement to the guy.
Serves him right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she went on to get a faculty position at Northern Arizona University, that one. By the way, I would add that all of the Duke activists on the faculty, every single one of them went on to bigger and better things afterwards. That there was literally no punishment for them, even though they were right in the midst of falsely accusing people. And that's something that people need to understand. That higher education, by the way, did not reform itself. There were no reforms after this. This was just something where it just bonfire blew through, and then life went on as usual.
What happened to that original prosecutor? What was the story there?
Well, you guys, your viewers are going to love this. He was appointed by the governor on with the promise that he would not run for election. But what happened was the prosecutor that was there became a judge. And so now you have to have a replacement. And so he was an assistant prosecutor. He took the job, and he had no plans to run for to be elected. Okay. Well, his wife one night was looking at retirement pension. She says, if you can get elected and serve 4 years as a DA, you can get an extra $15,000 a year in your pension. Like, oh, wow, okay. And so he decides to run for election. And his campaign was dead in the water. Now, Durham is, being the voting population is mostly radical whites and blacks. Okay. And so it's a Democrat city. And so the only elections that matter there are the Democratic primaries. And so in the Democratic primary, he was getting blown out of the water. He hadn't even loaned this is what your old TAT, Casey Johnson found out that Nifong had loaned his campaign $30,000. And the way that it would work, if he got elected, then the attorneys, of course, that would practice in Durham would then take care of that. He basically buy it off. You make contributions to take care of his debt, and that'll take care of everything else. Well, so anyway, this is, so he was behind in the polls, and he knew he was going to get beat. So now he's going to be stuck with a $30,000 debt that he had loaned his campaign. What to do? Well, this thing fell in his lap, and he jumped on it. Now, there's something else that you guys need to know, and that is that the police started investigating, and his lead investigator was officer, and last name was Hyman, and Himan. And he meets with Nifong, and he tells him, look, we got no DNA evidence. We have nothing. She tells, conflicting stories. We have absolutely nothing in this case. And Nifong looks at him and says, we're effed, and then he says, you go out and you get me something. On that very day, okay, a day that he was told he had no evidence, that was when he went on his media spree, met with all of these, journalists, and did interview after interview, did over 70 of them, in which he said, oh, we've got a lot of evidence. Yes, there was a rape. I believe that, that, and all this. And he went on the offensive knowing that he had absolutely no evidence that he was lying about what he had. And so that's one of the reasons why he got disbarred, because it wasn't just the kinds of statements he was saying. It was statements he made absolutely knowing that he did not have evidence in the first place. And,
So the irregularities in this case are just through the roof.
Yeah.
And then they're found innocent, but yet you have to assume, given that they had the media, they had the university itself, They had all the the usual agitators against them. That even if they got their names technically cleared, they still have to walk around with this cloud of suspicion, I would assume.
Well, yes, it for a while. I mean, I think ultimately it went away, and thank goodness for Ed Bradley. I mean, he on 60 Minutes, he just the last one he ever did before he died of cancer, he just absolutely blew the case out of the water.
I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, it was in October, and I remember my daughter calling me up and said she watched it. She said, "Dad, I had no idea. Now I see why you were so active in this." And yeah, I mean, he threw a bomb in there, and then Leslie Stahl jumped in afterwards. After Bradley died, she jumped in and she further blew the thing up. And but even then, the New York Times is still desperately trying to save this case. I mean, the behavior of the New York Times in this is something to behold. This is where you have the newspaper of record trying its very best to get these guys in prison, to get them convicted, that there is a case there, that on and on and on. And, Tom, I will tell you that, the New York Times, their behavior in this was atrocious. I will always look at them as these are the guys that covered up the Ukrainian famine, Stalin's Ukrainian famine back in the 1930s, and then for their encore they gave us the Duke Lacrosse case.
It's just crazy. But you and Casey Johnson were out in front on that. Now, at that time, obviously we had the internet, but I don't think social media was quite as mature yet as it has become.
No, and I think this social media would have made this much worse.
Tom Woods Show listeners, I know you recognize the importance of sound money, and I know a lot of you are interested in Bitcoin. And you may have heard the expression, not your keys, not your coins. So a lot of you have your Bitcoin on an exchange, and I know you need to get it off that exchange, but you don't know how to do it. It seems like something only techies would know. You don't know where to start. Now, with enough time and dedication, anyone can learn to properly take their Bitcoin into self-custody. But stuck on this fiat treadmill, a lot of people just don't have the spare hours at the end of the day to figure it all out. Well, Bitcoin Mentor is a personalized one-on-one education and Bitcoin consultancy service founded by the best in Bitcoin education, BTC Sessions, Mr. Ben Perrin. So whether you're a beginner or a longtime hodler looking to upgrade, and sorry, I cannot say hodler, that just doesn't sound right to me, Bitcoin Mentor can guide you through self-custody, running a node, home mining, multi-sig setup, even inheritance planning. Leaving Bitcoin on an exchange risks losing everything gained to a hack, bankruptcy, or 6102 attack. Their team of mentors will work with you based on your specific needs to get you to the point where you can sleep easy at night knowing your money is secured and in your control. Visit bitcoinmentor.io/woods for special discounted offers for Tom Woods listeners. That's bitcoinmentor.io/woods. Well, I was wondering, because I sometimes think social media is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, for example, during COVID, we were able to get some dissident voices, at least some, even though there was censorship. We got some, whereas without the internet, we would have had, NBC, ABC, and Fox News kind of thing, and that would have been a problem. But on the other hand, because the internet reaches every nook and cranny of the world, it can also encourage the worst kind of copycat behavior all over the world, where everybody accepts the officially approved opinion and the officially approved praxis. So we're all going to wear 2 masks or whatever. It has a way of lighting a brush fire all over the world. In this case, though, I think there are, like Daniel Penny, for example, in New York City. I think if it hadn't been for all the problems of social media, if it hadn't been for this ability that the people have to communicate with each other, I think there's a very good chance he would have been railroaded, and there would have been one side of the story. That would have been the end of it.
Yeah. And it's hard to know because we're talking about a counterfactual. We're trying to talk about something that did not happen and trying to put something in it. But I think that what generally happens in situations like this is that the lie gets out first. And then, while we like to say the lie is out running while truth is putting on its shoes. And then later on, I'm sorry about that. But later on, that we have a situation that the truth starts coming. It's like COVID, that at first blush, oh my God, this is the apocalypse now, and then later on, maybe apocalypse never. So I think that certainly it would have been a case. What we did have were the blogs. Casey Johnson had a thing on Google's blog spot. At that time, they didn't censor it. And he had this blog called Durham in Wonderland. And it was a great gathering place. I got death threats on it. And in the comment sections, I told the people making threats, I said, please come visit us. I said, we have a Second Amendment household.
It's worth noting that in those days, blogs were much bigger than they are now.
Yeah.
And it's also worth remembering, especially because I'll have some younger people listening to this, that even back then, even YouTube, you didn't think of YouTube as a place that was going to censor you or shut you up. You could say anything you wanted pretty much on YouTube. I mean, almost anything on YouTube in those days.
Yeah.
That came only later.
Yeah, that came later when tech became more politicized to the left. And really in the academic, all the nonsense going on in the academic world started filtering out to the business world, especially the tech world. We could see that. You and I have both had, we both have ties to the academic world. And we could see the nonsense that goes on, but especially the elite universities are really the worst. Frostburg, by the way, I never received one lick of criticism from anybody for my involvement. And it was widely known, that I was involved in this case. Nobody said, in fact, people came to me and wanted to know what was the situation. And I would tell them. And they said, okay. Now, that could never gone on at Duke. I would have been threatened. I would have been, had them going after me. And professors that did stand up against the mob, they were threatened. And they were intimidated, bullied, and everything else.
Did you ever, at any time in this, during or after, did you ever have an opportunity to speak to any of these young men or their parents?
Yeah. In fact, Reed Seligman and I keep conversation. I remember I talked some to Ray Evans, David Evans' mom. His dad was not very friendly to me, at the time. I don't know why, but he just wasn't. A number of the other parents, though, they contacted me. We would go to some of their lacrosse games, and I'd get treated like royalty. And I remember I had when my adopted daughter Sasha, she was little, and players loved her, and I'd bring her down to the games and the like. So it was kind of a mixed bag. But I didn't really know these folks at all. I mean, and most of them came from, frankly, a higher social class than I did. And Frostburg was not an elite, university. And so, I did not have that kind of academic pedigree that allows me to move into Duke circles. And I didn't have a social pedigree. I, grew up in a working class town in Pennsylvania. And so, it was a different, their world was very different from mine. But nonetheless, that most of the people were very, very supportive.
What do you say to Crystal? What's the name?
Mine.
She recently acknowledged that yeah, I was lying, as we kind of had all concluded, but she acknowledged it recently. And she hopes that the victims, because she was not the victim, the victims can forgive her. If you could talk to her, what would you say to her?
Well, that's a good question. It's really funny is that the anger of the parents, of the families, was not really at Crystal. They realized she was messed up. I mean, and by the way, I'm going to add one other thing, and that is that, she's in prison. She stabbed her boyfriend. He died about 2 weeks later, and so she got convicted of that. And she's in North Carolina prison. She's probably going to be coming up for parole fairly soon. And I guarantee you that she's been told, you keep up that nonsense, it's a non-starter. And if you try to tell us that these guys really did that, you're not getting parole under any circumstances.
Wow, so I had not known that detail.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. But I think she probably is sincere. I think that, you're talking about someone who's, is on, she was an addict. I would say that probably Reed Seligman, let's say she contacted, she and Reed Seligman would probably, he would listen to her. I don't know about Colin Fennard. I don't know. I know that Reed went to law school. And last time I checked, he was clerking for a federal judge. He's married, has a family. I don't know what's happened with Colin and David Evans. Reed was a genuinely kind person, a nice guy. And in fact, he left that stripper party early because he was disgusted with the whole thing. But the way that Crystal chose the guy, she went on Google. Attorneys got her computer, and she looked for the 3 highest income zip codes for the players, and those were the guys that she chose. I mean, it was a total crapshoot, but that's that the idea was by then, hey, we can make. She told her stripper friends, "I'm going to make money from the white boys," and so it was. Once she realized she could make money from this, then she jumped on that. And, it's probably, she's been in prison, oh gosh, I think since about 2011. And I'll be honest, people do change in prison. I think, and you get older and you get more reflective and the like. And I think she probably is, in her own way, as sincere as she probably can be. But I would also add that if she were to continue to insist that she was raped, she ain't getting parole.
Yeah, and that is that detail makes the timing seem a little bit too convenient.
Tom, that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that. I thought, oh, she must be coming up for parole soon. And I hate to be cynical. And it's not, I'm not trying to be cynical there. I'm just saying
but Billy, I mean, in your defense, it has been 18 years since these events. So you would have to ask why now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would say that, the possibility of parole would be a great motivating factor.
Yeah. Fascinating.
He never apologized. He was arrogant and defiant to the end. And, he's a bad character, and he should have gone to prison. I mean, he broke a number of federal laws, and interestingly, the federal prosecutor who lived in Reed Seligman's district in New Jersey wanted to investigate, and he was told under no uncertain terms that, and this was the last couple of years of the Bush administration, that they were not going to touch this case. And my guess, okay, and I'm going to toss a pure speculation here, but I bet there's something to it. And that is that Liddy Dole, Republican, was running for re-election in the North Carolina Senate. And she did not want to do, that if there was going to be a prosecution of Mike Nifong, I think they were afraid it would galvanize the Black community. Remember that the NAACP and the Black community in general, they pushed this thing as far as they could. And even after the Attorney General's declaration they were innocent, that the North Carolina NAACP on its website still was proclaiming them guilty, and they had all of these timelines that were false. They had all of this stuff that they put up there, these accusations that were false. And so I think that to a certain extent, they were afraid that if they really, really went after Nifong, that it would be a non-starter with the Black community.
That is absolutely wild. That, and of course, I assume no apologies have ever been forthcoming.
No.
Wouldn't even occur to them. And yet these are considered to be some of the most morally upright people of our society. We're supposed to defer to them and take their opinions into special consideration.
Well, it's the Reverend William Barber, who's now, big in the national scene with the NAACP. At the time, he was the head of the North Carolina NAACP. He's the one who started, remember, Moral Mondays, and he's the one always lionized in the media. Well, he did a lot to push this case to where it was. And now he would always keep this front of, we just want justice to occur wherever it goes. But the people that they had, the attorneys and people working behind the scenes, for example, they pushed for a gag order. The NAACP has always been against gag orders. They violated their own policy with that. When the players asked for a change of venue because they felt they couldn't get a fair trial in Durham, the NAACP declared this case began in Durham. It needs to, be heard in Durham. And so they fought that. And so, in other words, everything the NAACP supposedly had stood for, they violated because they had such a vested interest in seeing these guys go into prison. And I'll tell you what, my feeling is, my sense is that had they gone to prison, that they would put them in the general population. Those guys wouldn't have lasted 30 days.
So you mean it was a death sentence for them?
Oh, absolutely. It would have been a death sentence. Absolutely. I have no doubt about it.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah,
it's impossible to respect an organization like that. Even if you, if you maybe some people had some kind of lingering sense that there's some attachment here to the civil rights movement, and that was good, and so we're supposed to. This must. I don't pay attention to the NAACP, but my guess is that this goes on all the time. That the facts just don't matter. It's just a racial spoil system.
Yeah, and I think that.
What else could it be? How else can these people act when you're in an organization like that that fundraises on this basis? It's the same like the Southern Poverty Law Center. They fundraise off crazy scares, whether it's anti-Semitism, so-called, or whatever. That's if that's how they get their income, that's how they're going to act.
Yeah, it's where the money is.
Bill, well, I don't mean to say that there's at least there's a satisfying conclusion to this, in that they were found not guilty, and now we have the alleged victim openly admitting that the story was made up. But that was a long time coming, and I guess that over time people eventually do hear the story that they were falsely accused, but I wouldn't want to go through that. I wouldn't want to carry that albatross with me my whole life.
No, people, look, the stress on those families, people got sick. David Evans' grandfather died that summer. And the stress on everybody was huge. Reed Seligman's mom had to spend some time in the hospital. It was an awful thing. And people that were involved tell me about the news media camped outside their yards, and that their lives were a total fishbowl. They were being accused of this and that. And, this is where people just let it rip, and there were no constraints at all. It was, and look, it happens. I've written stuff. I've had some people on the right go after me because they didn't like what I said, and so they ripped into me. And, of course, people on the left have ripped into me for years, but it's just, people feel no sense of restraint. I'm going to say whatever I want to say because I know this has to be true.
Yeah, it's like I need it to be true. For my worldview to be vindicated,
Yeah.
this needs to be true. And this, you can't have a legal system on the basis of that.
Here's another thing, too, is that I remember that this came as in part as a result of what's going on college campuses. And what do we have in the academic world is the formation of narratives and especially all of the people that were for the Duke faculty. They came out of the liberal arts. They came out of the, what we call the identity studies, where they operate on narratives. And of course, the English department. We have to have the English department. And everything's a narrative. And so you fit something within a storyline and nothing is allowed to deviate from that. And like I've told my wife, I said the Duke case really provided something for everyone. I spoke at a gathering in Northern Virginia in January of 2007. So when the case is still quite alive. And one of the people on the guy who brought the house down that night in a speech at front, I don't remember a thing he said. All I know is I was very troubled afterwards. But Richard Spencer, that Richard Spencer. At the time, he was a grad student at Duke, and he spoke to this gathering that I'd been invited to speak to. I think I got paid $100 or something, and it was about the Duke faculty, and you had, of course, the whole, race was thrown into it. Race was thrown into all of this stuff. And I remember leaving that night. I don't remember anything anybody said. I don't even remember what I said other than talking about prosecutorial misconduct. But I just remember feeling kind of troubled and realized that, what you've got here is a situation where people on all sides were just pushing their narratives. And, nobody wanted to see the bigger picture. And, and I'll be honest, nothing changed. It's not like, you got a prosecutor disbarred, but it wasn't. I mean, we should have had thousands of prosecutors disbarred, Tom. That stuff that Nightfall was an outlier in that he pushed well beyond what a lot of these folks will do. But a lot of folks have done a lot of the same kind of things, not just, the cases that don't get the publicity. Prosecutors have gone after people when they knew they were innocent, but they didn't want to drop their case, that sort of thing. So I'm telling you that, there was something for everyone. And, but yet, I would say no substantive change and anything came out of it. People just got hardened in their positions. You didn't have any inward looking at Duke. The faculty members there, they just either didn't want to talk about it, they moved on to another cause. And then we end up with the summer of George Floyd. All right. And where now you've got narratives just running wild. And now they're burning down cities and tearing down monuments and everything else.
I would say if we had to look for a silver lining, which of course is not worth what these guys went through, but if we had to find a silver lining, it would be that at least to some degree, the American legal system, which we see depicted on television, on Law and Order, and in the movies, as being the very instantiation of justice itself, became a bit demystified for some people. And it got taken down a few notches from the pedestal that it didn't deserve to be on, and that's at least something.
Tom, there's something else too that people don't know, and I think is really important here, and that is that the three guys that were indicted, one of them, his father was involved with a hedge fund, and he had the money, and they had to spend on the defense side to deal with the case that from the start was obviously false, $5 million. All right. The attorneys got $5 million in fees. And I mean, for investigators, they were extremely thorough. But here's the point that I'll make, that because of what Nifong was doing, because of what the New York Times was doing, because of what the Duke University administration and faculty were doing, that they had to spend $5 million in this case to attorneys to be able to get to a point where there was a stalemate. And I think ordinary people just don't stand a chance. Now, who knows, maybe ordinary people might not have been railroaded, but often they were. I mean, Daniel Penny, there was no crowdfunding back then. You didn't have, GoFundMe, but Daniel Penny was able to raise legal funds, through that. But I think that is a number that absolutely still blows me away, to think that what it took to be able to present some kind of defense. And by the way, that it should have been done away with at the beginning, because all logic pointed away from it. You can revisit this thing 1,000 times. There is no way it could have happened. It could not have happened, especially in the way that it was described.
Well, Bill, not only thanks for your time, but obviously thank you for the work you did at the time as this was happening. Because the first person I thought of to talk to about this when I read about this in the paper just now was Bill Anderson, because I remember all those pieces you wrote, and you did something very important for people who were to you complete strangers, just because you believed in justice, and that's a rare thing these days. So thank you for that, and for talking to them.
Yeah. Also, a shout out to Lou Rockwell, because Lou let me. He gave me his page. That was Perch. And let me tell you, if it hadn't been for Lou Rockwell, I'm not sure that message would have gotten out. And it helped K.C. Johnson. And, I remember one New York Times reporter who contacted me because he was really upset with his paper. He said, I really like your stuff better than his. But I liked K.C. because K.C. was a great investigator, and that's what he decided. That was his mission in life. And, K.C. is a great academic street fighter, as I call him. And, and he doesn't back down. And so, I'd say Lou Rockwell is an unsung hero in all of this. And I think we would have to recognize him and thank him. And I'm glad that I was able to be at Frostburg State, where at the time, that they certainly were a lot more, let's say, liberal in the true sense of the word than any of the elite universities.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, so you're right. So that institutional position you had, and Lou having a very widely read website and letting you use it for this purpose, these are two contingent factors that combine to help make this all possible. So the thanks belong to all those people. So Bill, thanks so much. I appreciate the time today very, very much.
Tom, I'm glad to have a chance to be able to maybe help set some of the stories straight too.
No doubt. And indeed, now that we have this confession, it really is the final period on the story.
Yeah. Keep in mind, though, that the feminists especially moved on to something else. And the people that were responsible for pushing this, they've long, left this in the rearview mirror, and they're pushing some other false narrative. So they're always out there.
Yeah, no doubt. And so the fight continues, even if this particular battle has been resolved. So thanks again, Bill.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.